And hello, movie lovers, and welcome to the show. So tonight, I actually have a very special guest. It's Brian from My Weekly Mixtape, and it's a pleasure to actually have him here. I was actually part of Playlist Wars doing a GTA episode with him and Gomez. Gomez was actually on my show for The Last of Us. So it's a privilege to be able to have him on here doing That Thing You Do. And I don't know if he's going to do That Thing You Do, but we're going to review That Thing You Do. So with further ado, let's go ahead and review That Thing You Do. Hey, Brian, how are you?
What's up, man? How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Hey, anytime, man. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. I love My Weekly Mixtape. I think it's the most wonderful thing to have, and it's also something that I really love is the intro when you say, what does mixtape mean to you? Because it makes that much more personal. But I'm not going to go ahead and talk about your own show. I want you to tell me about what My Weekly Mixtape is.
My Weekly Mixtape is a podcast that I developed based on kind of an autobiographical nature of who I am as a person. Because when I was growing up, anytime I did chores around the house and I earned a little bit of allowance money, what I would like to do was when I went food shopping with my parents, I would peel off by the cassettes and grab a 2-pack of Maxell XL2s. So that way I could come home and make mixtapes for my weekend. If my buddies came over, they would bring their music collection over. I would have mine, and we would make a mixtape together and then play video games and listen to the mixtape back. And we would kind of always do this round robin of you pick a song, I pick a song, you pick a song. So what I'm doing on this podcast is recreating that experience with fellow podcasters, friends, family, as well as in some instances, the band themselves. So to be able to go back and forth with a member of that band and collaborate on a mixtape based on their music from the band plus fan perspective. To me, it's fascinating to conduct interviews that way and to kind of hear where the musicians think about a song versus where I as a fan think about it. And then when it's me and some friends or me and other podcasters where I have a friend and I have an opinion on a song and my friend feels differently, kind of figuring out how that conversation goes. So It's part of basically collaborating together in order to create a piece of music together based on other people's music, that collaborative stamp that you put on a mixtape. Because when you drag 50 songs into a playlist and hit shuffle, all you did was randomize a bunch of songs. But when you're making a mixtape, you're trying to tell a story. And that's what I'm trying to bring across in this show.
Exactly, man. That's what I love about it. And you know what? On the Fly says Captain Geek and the Shrimp Shark Shooters.
Captain Geach. Hey, I'm wearing the shirt. I don't have the Captain Geach shirt, but I got the Oneaters shirt. I'm repping the Oneaters tonight.
Nice. So here's the thing. So That Thing You Do is actually written by Tom Hanks. And not only that, but this movie also had a budget of $26 million and made $34.6 million at the box office, which is pretty impressive when this is actually Tom Hanks' debut movie. And I didn't know that it didn't do that well. I remember seeing advertisements back in the 90s for this movie. And you couldn't go without watching TV without seeing an ad for this, you know?
No, and the thing about it was the song that's in the movie is the tent pole of this film. If the song That Thing You Do sucked, the movie would have bombed. But the song was so infectious that they could play it in this movie at least a dozen times. Mm-hmm. And it still carries you through this hour and 48 minutes, and you never get sick of it, because that's the beauty of Adam Schlesinger, who was in Fountains of Wayne and Tinted Windows before he sadly passed, wrote this song, and he's a genius of a songwriter. He was a genius songwriter. And this song is one of the most infectious pop songs ever, let alone the 90s. And it makes this film enjoyable because of how much of an earworm that song is.
Most definitely, and it even transforms you into the 1950s and has that 1950s kind of vibe that they're going for, which is like this Beatle kind of vibe
Hmm.
mixed in with a little bit of monkeys and stuff like that too. So that's the kind of vibe I got from it whenever I first watched the film, and also whenever I first listened to the song. That thing you do whenever and get this, I would watch this every single time it came on DirecTV. I couldn't even not watch this movie. I had to watch this every single time it came on, to the
Yeah,
point
and
where I actually had to record it.
then the same thing with that theme song. They literally just missed a fantasy meets real life moment because it reached number 41 on the Billboard Hot 100s. So the Wonders could have been a one-hit wonder in the movie and then in the real world simultaneously, which is kind of meta and pretty cool if you think about that.
It really is if you think about it in that kind of context. You know what I mean? Because it's one hit wonders in the real world, one hit wonders in the movie itself, and it gives you something a little bit more relatable and that kind of meta kind of feel to it. But On the Fly says, "Great song. I had to go out and buy the soundtrack as soon as I finished the movie."
Man, let me tell you, I could actually tell you a story about that. I was in college when this movie came out, and I was going to school in North Carolina. So I was driving from New Jersey down to North Carolina with my buddy who lived on the same floor as us. And we drove halfway. This was around winter break. And we said, you know what? Let's just grab a hotel for the night and do the rest of the drive in the morning because we left after dinner. And we are like, let's just call it a night. So we go grab a late dinner. We get back to the room. And this was back in the 90s when you could rent movies that were still in the theater at the time. And sure enough, that thing you do was on the hotel. So we said, you know what? It's midnight. Let's just pop this movie on and then we'll pass out and hit the road first thing in the morning. Movie was so good. I made my buddy follow, like I drove, but I took us to the nearest Walmart and grabbed the soundtrack so we could listen to it for the rest of the drive down in North Carolina. So yes, the soundtrack's amazing. And the opening song in the movie, the song that plays over the
Right.
credits, just like the movie was directed, Tom Hanks wrote that song, which is a
Really?
little
That's
fun.
impressive.
Yes. Yeah. And he was going for that pop choral sound of the 50s that was popular, like Ray Conniff and Lawrence Welk. He nailed it. It was like such a perfect opening because it
Most
sets the
definitely.
tone.
Right. It also describes Guy. It describes all these characters that are trying to be discovered within this movie itself, though, too. So yeah, most definitely. I think that's very impressive. I never knew that about Tom Hanks doing that. But yeah, so let's go on ahead. Let's dive into this a little bit. So, of course, it starts off in 1964. Guy Patterson, an aspiring jazz drummer, is working in his family's appliance store in Erie, Pennsylvania, when he's asked by Jimmy Manigley and Lenny Hayes to perform at a talent show with their band, The Wanderers, to cover for Chad. So what I like is the introduction to the characters and about how close their relationship is, and it makes it that more personal to us as a viewer. As also too, it also gives you this one feeling of, okay, maybe I know somebody like Lenny, maybe I know somebody like these guys that are in this band, and especially when they're trying to come up with the name for their band and stuff like that, and how they try to be perfect is basically what I'm thinking of whenever I'm thinking of the lead singer trying to be a perfectionist.
The Wonders, the wonder. Now, I have, being a musician and have being in several bands throughout my life, I have had that band name discussion before. And there's a reason why That Thing You Do is my favorite movie. That whole scene where he's writing the name down feverishly on the paper. And he's like, no, the Wonders, the Wonders. We had those moments because there was always that point in the band where you were trying to do a play on letters or a play on different words. And my first band name, my hard rock band, was called The Fourth, like 4TH. And so many times we would explain that I'd be on the phone booking a gig and we'd get there and they'd announce us as The Force, like Star Wars or something like that. And it was why the Oneaters joke resonated with me so much, because the Wonders, I got immediately as soon as he said the Wonders, I'm like, this is going to be a total like joke through the whole movie. And it wasn't through the whole movie, but it was enough to the point where they beat it to death enough where I just love the joke. It's one of my favorites, and that's thus the t-shirt.
And it makes sense, though. I mean, it makes it different. It makes it authentic. It makes it something that stands out versus something that somebody would just wind up just was spelling perfectly. And I think that in the 1950s, you need to stand out a lot more because of that time period. You have the Beatles, you have the Monkees, you have all these bands coming out. So you have to be standing out from the norm. So what better way to do that than to a misspelling of the T-shirt or the band name itself and do it that way? So that's what I got from when they were trying to be creative with it. But I could actually tell with Guy though, whenever we first get introduced into Guy, is when you see him working in the appliance store, right? And you can tell that he's not into it. You can definitely tell he's not into this. He'd rather be out being a drummer for his jazz band or something like that rather than working in his dad's appliance store. Yes, that's what his dad is accustomed to. That's what his dad is hoping for. But that's not his dream. That was his dad's dream, not his. So he's trying to live his dream through his son, which causes the conflict of every single time whenever a guy picks up a drumstick, the guy acts like a ball bag because of the fact he'd rather his son follow in his own footsteps.
Exactly. And I have seen, because this is my favorite movie, I have the directorials cut on Blu-ray as well as the original. And I've watched both many times. And what they've tried to do in the directorial cut was flesh this family relationship, Guy's family, out. And they kind of did too much, because the theatrical version, you get that sense immediately. And they go back a couple of times, and then they do the payoff at the end where it turns around and the family's on board when they're live on TV. They, in the extended version, they really kept going back to it and trying to really explain that family dynamic when it was done so well and so succinctly in the theatrical version. That was one of the differences I was not a fan of in the directorial cut.
Same here as well. I'm all for simplicity versus doing something that is overcooked. It's like, okay, we get it. The father doesn't like him being in a band. He'd rather him work in the appliance store. He's living the father's trying to make his dream live through his son, so the way he can inherit the store. His sister doesn't get paid for working in the store at all. So we have the establishment of these characters, so there's no need to overcook it to the point where they're beating us over the head with it. So yeah, theatrical cut over the extended cut is definitely the way to go for me.
Well, I'm torn, because on the flight, my buddy Steve chimed in.
Okay.
The directorial cut does tell a lot more, and it really, really does. The theatrical version's an hour and 47. The director's cut's 2 hours and 26 minutes. Some part of the thanks, dude. Some part of the director's cut I love, because they flesh out the relationship of the band and they show extended practice sequences. And to me, as a band person, I relate so much to those scenes. They could have did a 4-hour cut of just those practice scenes, and I would have been all in, because you really learn about the dynamic of these 4 characters, the 4 characters that are the glue of this movie, even though they make Guy and Liv Tyler's character Faye kind of the central characters with Tom Hanks, Mr. White. The band is really the focal point of this movie, and getting to see where some of the animosity builds from more in depth, to me, is fascinating. But there's other parts, again, the dynamic of Guy Patterson's family, not as much. Things like that I don't feel are important to the movie. But then scenes like when they're recording That Thing You Do in the church with Chris Isaac as playing Guy's uncle, at the end of the song, Jimmy pleads to just do one take for the B-side. And I'm shocked that's not in the theatrical version, because there's a payoff to that shortly later when he says to Mr. White, but we only did one take of the B-side. I'd really like to recut it. Yes, it makes sense what he says in that scene of the movie, but seeing him plead to record that song just to get it on there in the first place shows a little bit more of Jimmy's character, because he is the talent of this group and everybody else is kind of the supporting cast.
Most definitely. And
Yes,
you know,
tell Paxton.
but here's the thing. I definitely agree with you on that because here's the thing. I love Almost Famous. Of course, I did the review on that. But what I loved about that one particular scene was the fact that it looked like a VH1 behind the music kind of thing, especially when the characters interviewing these rock stars, because the camera takes a turn. And in this case, they could have done kind of the same thing where it feels more like a documentary kind of thing behind the music of the making of the Wonders. So that was something that I wish they would actually capitalized on and do. So
Completely agreed. That would honestly, the fact that this movie does not have a sequel, I understand that uh the movie ended. They explained the future. But I almost feel like there could have been that 70s sequel where they got the band back together or something else, or
like a
there's a
reunion tour or something.
something. Yeah. Like I feel like there's because I just loved these characters in this film so much. But at the also saying that so many sequels suck that I almost don't want them to ruin to what for me is a perfect film. So
Right, especially waiting this long to do a sequel. I've seen where sequels to movies over 30 years doesn't do well and doesn't receive well. So yeah, I think this works perfectly as a one-off versus doing several sequels, to be honest with you. But yeah, then even with Tina, which is Guy's girlfriend, she has zero interest even in any of Guy's passions or anything like that either. She's just there just because Guy is there and because of the fact that he wants her to support her, but he's forcing her basically to trying to support him. But it's hard to do that when somebody shows zero support of you. You know what I mean?
yeah, that again, the directorial's cut dives way deep into the story between um Tina and Guy. And I feel like that part almost kind of was too much in the directorial version because the movie version tells that story again much more succinctly. And I think when they pared it down, that was a less is more moment for me in the movie. But they really stretched out Tina and the dentist's relationship. And like, I get it, but I felt like those scenes were unnecessary in the directorial's cut.
Exactly. That's actually how I feel though too, because we get it. She's going to be cheating on him with the dentist. And I think that all you have to do is put her in the dentist chair, him closing the blinds, and that's it. That's all you have to know. And but for them to do, oh look, we're going to play tennis today. Oh look, we're going out on dates while the guy is on tour. I'm like,
That was a little too much. Too
yeah.
much.
Let's see here. We actually have something from Oh My God, I Love That Song. The band reuniting would be the perfect premise to redo Almost Famous. Uh,
Interesting.
that's actually an interesting take. I honestly think that they ended it right. No sequel needed. And then I Love That Song also said they agreed. But, I think the simple thing to do is the way they did it, the theatrical cut with Tina is like just showing her the dentist chair. She's cheating on him. She has no interest in Guy anymore. Guy goes on about his business and does what he does.
They summed it up in the theatrical version in two scenes. She smiles at the dentist. They cut the scene. Then when Guy calls her, she simply just says, "Oh, I've got, a dentist appointment." And that told the story. That's all you needed. And it was able to move back to the music because I felt like you don't need to develop Tina's character anymore.
No.
I know it's Charlize Theron and she's a big name. And this was one of her first roles, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this is like Charlize Theron whenever she was first starting out.
Right.
This is not like the woman that we know now.
Right.
And she was not a household name compared to now. So I understand what they were trying to do. They were like, oh, this is going to be the next big star, and we need to go ahead and put her into as many scenes as we can. So maybe somebody will notice her, probably, which is understandable.
Yeah, and she certainly made a great career out of it. So
she definitely did. Atomic Blonde, the list just goes on with that. But but yeah, another thing too is we actually have this other thing where Chad is basically jumping over these just basically just jumping
The
over
parking meters.
the parking meters. Thank you. And and then all of a sudden he breaks his arm because of this, and then that puts Guy in the hot seat to be able to drum.
Right. And
And that's one thing that I thought that was really interesting. Okay, so back in the 1950s, breaking your arm, jumping over to parking meters would be so rock and roll for that era, to where they're like, okay, Guy, well, how did you get your role in being in the drum? We know Chad was the original drummer. Well, Chad decided he wanted to jump over parking meters, and then next thing you know it, he winds up breaking his arm, and now I'm here. So
yeah,
that's like so rock and roll for the 50s.
I know. And the directorial's cut is the scene that I wish they left in the theatrical version, because he's just laying there on the ground and they're just going, Chad, are you okay? And he's like just destroyed. It was like almost a Family Guy type of humor. And I just laughed so much at that. I was actually bummed that didn't make the theatrical cut. I understand it was an hour and 47 as it is, but the extra 30 seconds would have just been
right. They could have shaved off some points off of the Tina storyline and just had that one little spot there open for a comedic timing. I've been sold for that. Right. But then you also have this moment now with the band where they're now finally in the talent show, and now Guy is over there taking Chad's spot. And this is actually one of my favorite scenes, because now he's trying to figure out this band. He's trying to figure out his friend's band, because all he knows is jazz. So he's trying to figure out the tempo, even whenever they're during rehearsal. Mm-hmm. He's trying to figure that out. And the funny thing that I love Tyler's character in this, though, too, especially the thing with the sandwich. He goes, well, I don't want no bologna sandwich. And they made it so comical with that. And then he bangs into her sister's car. He goes, oh, I tinged it a little bit. And basically it's a sexual reference to them, which I thought was really subtle, but also funny, though, at the same time. So I thought that was really some comical stuff within that with Bay.
Definitely. And the thing I love about that scene where the band plays on stage for the first time, Tom Hanks actually had Tom Everett Scott, Steve Zahn, Jonathan Sach, and Ethan Embry do a month-long boot camp to learn how to play their instruments. And I talked about this on my podcast before. If you're in a movie and you are performing songs, if you're just doing with the bass where your hands never move, you're not going to sell it. And if you're singing, you're not going to sell it. So you think about a movie like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Clooney sells that he's singing. You believe that's his voice. Same thing with the movie Rockstar. Marky Mark sells that he is this 80s hair band singer. You believe it. And Tom Everett Scott, playing drums, if he was just up there kind of doing a robot thing, you would not have believed that character. So he had to actually learn to do the boom, pop, pop, boom, pop, boom, pop, pop, boom. And he had to know how to do that. And without that, because you're watching him play and kind of the look on his face. And if I really want to get into it and be, Tom Everett Scott, he gets into it. He's got the drums on and everything else. But again, the guitar player, they had to know where the chords were, because if not, they're just sitting there on the G the whole time. And you really need to be able to sell. Yes, Val Kilmer in The Doors, another great example of an actor encapsulating that singer role. And then Ethan Embry doing, which I absolutely love his character name in the movie, TB Player, which is the bass player. That is his actual character name in the film. Being a bass player, we never get love. So that little subtle jab that he doesn't even get a name in the movie is the most musical thing. As soon as I saw that in the credits, I burst out loud laughing the first time I saw the movie. And that is why I fell in love with it. Little things like that, the attention to detail, if you will, to really nail this stuff.
That's what I like about it, though, too. It's relatable. It's attention to detail. Not only that, but if you're in a band, you can actually notice the little details and stuff like that. and you can actually feel like an audience member who's watching the Wonders for the first time, just as these people from the 1950s are watching them for the very first time. So it's us engaging into this movie. Not to be honest with you, it doesn't even feel like a movie anymore. It feels like that we're in this with them, watching this band for the first time, coming up from where they are in this little Pennsylvania town, and we're watching them perform on stage for the very first time. So it's just like us as an audience member witnessing this for the very first time, just as the people standing up and dancing for the very first time.
100%. And that feeling of an audience being receptive to your song, the look of joy that they were sharing with each other, like when oh my God, my brain just turned off for a second. When Lenny turns around and says to Guy, "What is happening?" Like those moments in a band when the first time that a crowd relates to you, you're pulled into that moment. And as a musician, I related to that so much. I felt like that scene was something I had lived in my life. And I'm sure every musician, not every, but a lot of musicians probably feel the same way, because that just feeling of elated joy when someone's receptive to what you're playing, especially if it's an original. So
Exactly.
that was just such a joyous moment in the film.
For me too, though, because it's like, what is going on? And Guy's just doing his thing, doing his upbeat tempo. The lead sing, you actually have you have Jimmy who's just looking at him like, what the hell? This is not what I wanted. And Guy just doesn't care. He's just going at it, and it just works. It had that rock and roll kind of flavor, kind of popish sound that they were needing for it, even though it's supposed to be a slow tempo. And you basically, if you look at the talent show, everybody was falling asleep at that talent show. They're the ones who brought it back to where it needed to be.
And they sent it through the roof. Oh, for
To
the
the-
record, I was holding up the soundtrack because I saw Jason Palladino chimed in about, I want to listen to the soundtrack. So I held it up as a shout out to him. What's up, dude?
I need to get that soundtrack, to be honest
Oh
with you.
my God, it's so good. It's so good.
Because I downloaded the Almost Famous soundtrack because I love the movie so much that I'm like, I need to buy the soundtrack. There's no way I can't have it, But
Yeah.
let's see.
And oh my God, I love this song. Had mentioned that Almost Famous, another example of them selling those characters and selling the performance. So
yeah, speaking of really selling that moment, they really sold that they didn't know how to perfectly fake their singing when they're part of the Hollywood filming of the Shrimp Shack Shooters.
oh,
Yeah, that was hilarious. Because to me, honest with you, they're like, oh, they make us look like we're monkeys, and all of a sudden I'm thinking of the band the Monkeys, because that would be something that the Monkeys would
wink,
do.
wink.
Yep. So yeah,
That is
definitely.
exactly what that was, a wink, wink, nut. And to me, that scene, Captain Geach and the Strip Shack Shooters, is part of that joyous comedy. How often can you talk about a comedy that makes you genuinely laugh out loud? That is something you could sit down with, for the most part, with your children and watch. That is genuinely a hearty PG to PG-13 film that makes you laugh. There aren't many, but this movie has such genuine laughter, especially if your children have any interest in music, because
Exactly.
there's this innocence to the characters and the innocence of the era it's set in that allows them to keep the jokes in a PG realm, because that was what life was. I'm assuming, as my parents maybe have said, that is what life was like back then. So
Right, exactly. And that's actually how I feel, though. This is actually captures the 1950s in a lighthearted way. No filthy language, nothing that's out of the way or anything like that. This is a perfectly well-balanced film that you can enjoy with your family for the very first time and laugh out loud at little small moments. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And then there's the other thing too, where basically one of the fans winds up asking, well, when's the record going to come out? And Guy's looking at them like, is there going to be a record? Is there not going to be a record? What's going on here? Now we have we were just doing this as like a little gig, and now we have to take it serious. And we can even relate to that as like podcasters though too, in a sense where basically it takes somebody to say, well, when are you guys going to actually do something bigger? And they're like, oh my God, I got to do something bigger? What do I have to do? And so it goes into that whole time mind blowing of like, wait, I got to take this thing serious now because people are expecting it. And
Well,
so therefore, yeah.
I was going to say the part where the glowing Liv Tyler as Faye, she's just magical in this movie. She's such a lovely character, and you could really, she's such a warm character. You really feel her persona when she's selling the records and there's a line of people begging for it. That was the part of the movie where I'm like, that's Hollywood. That's magic. That's about as real as Star Wars. I've had CDs at gigs and people don't line up to buy them. It just doesn't happen. So that was the only part of the movie where I was like, be realistic. People would have came up, picked up the album, flipped it around a couple times, put it back down, said, oh, you're selling it for $1. Would you take 50 cents? That's what really happens.
Exactly. And it's hard to even do a CD now too for people to care. So because I was like at Walmart's one time, like this one guy comes up to me, want to buy a CD for $5? It's my rap album. I'm like, yeah, man, I'll support local music, see what you got on there. So yeah, $5, yeah. And them doing a $1 a pop is actually a smart way of actually getting your music out there. So I thought that was pretty neat. What happened to that? Okay, so Jason Paulindo, yeah. But this was the 50s, the introduction of rock and roll, and everyone wanted a piece of it. Yep,
you're right.
Definitely.
Yes, 100%. I just liken it to my experiences, but maybe back then, if you had a record, that's all you needed for people to think you were famous. But I think they caught on to it by the time I was doing it in the 90s and beyond. But yeah, I mean, yes, look at the reaction to the Beatles. Exactly. That's what this band is supposed to be. This is like the American version of that Beatles, except they're the one-hit wonder version. They never get past their Ed Sullivan moment like the Beatles. It exploded the Beatles on, but the groundwork that was laid for this band throughout the movie of the impending implosion was going to happen no matter the success. And that's why Johnny was able to go on and take his talent to play tone as well for like the rest of his career.
Okay. That's actually true. I didn't think about it like that in that kind of context though either. So yeah, that's definitely 100%. Another thing though too is I like how they're like, well, who's going to record it? How do we do this? Well, there's this record booth down the street. He goes, yeah, but that's only for birthday parties. Where do we go? Because, I have an Uncle Bob that's actually in the industry. And I like how Lenny looks at him. You mean your uncle who does church recordings and records in the church? He's going to let us do that? And I like how the Uncle Bob actually basically winds up taking them in as a family and winds up recording their CD, well, not CD, but their record. And I thought that was really impressive. You actually have one person that has faith in them, and it's his Uncle Bob. That's the only person in his family, in Guy's family, that supports him. So I thought that was really touching.
Yeah, and from a music nerd perspective, drums give you that amazing sound quality because you've got that reverb and you've got that beautiful live sound in a church. So for me, I was like, yeah, that, because again, in the 50s, you're recording into one microphone. Did you notice they were kind of surrounding this? So this was a true 1950 style recording, and getting that reverb was the only way to get it, was to get it naturally. So to be in that carnivorous church is what got that sound that they were looking for. And Chris Isaak, again, fantastic role, because knowing he is who he is as a musician, the lines kind of hit at a meta level as well, which I think was perfect casting on Tom Hanks' part for that.
Definitely. But yeah, that's also too, they went out playing gig at Velopino's, a local pizza parlor. When a fan asked them for a record, they decided to record the song, like I said, with the 45s. Local talent promoter Phil Horst notices the band, promising to get them on the radio within 10 days. Lenny convinces the band to sign with him. And this is the part that I thought was hilarious, because he got this guy, Phil, pulls up in an RV and said, hey, kid, if this guy was like short and stocky and had like a cigar in his mouth, he was like, hey, kid, I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm going to make you big, kid. Come over here into my RV over here. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna make you big. I'm gonna make you big stars. And I could just see them like, I don't know about this. I don't, and I don't blame the lead singer being questionable about this. Like, I don't know about this, but I like how Phil just takes the initiative. Look, if you don't believe me, within 10 days, tear up the contract. No skin off my bones or anything. There's no money involved in this yet. I'm just believing you guys. I'm going to try and get you some airplay, see what happens, see what pops, see what doesn't pop. And I like that whole entire feel of Phil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this whole scene to me, it delivers my favorite line in the movie. A man in a really nice camper wants to sign our band and put our you're signing, we're all signing. That to me is one of the funniest parts of the movie because they're like feeding him stew off the like kind of like little stick, and they're all sitting there and they try to vilify Jimmy's character because he is the skeptic. But in reality, he was being very smart, being cautious about his songs, but it does take away from kind of so in a way, the movie's light tone vilifies that nature, but at being in a band, there does need to be that voice of reason.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, there was this kind of swing with it where I was laughing at the dynamic of the discussion, but also understanding that there's more to this character because of the fact that every band sometimes lives on these fantasies and he's the one trying to ground it in a little bit of reality, but it does kind of vilify him in the process. But that kind of does, again, add to who he is with Faye throughout the movie and the character. So there's a lot of layers to him, and that's the point. There should be.
You see, there was times that I was siding with him, and there was parts that I was like, "You're being a total ball bag." But in this situation, everybody on this is on this high level where it's like, "Okay, give me a pen right now. I'll sign right now." And then and you need that level of reality of like, "Hey guys, I don't know about this. These are my songs. These are not your songs. You guys are just singing my songs." So we need to have some even ground here. And I like how Lenny's over there just like, you know what, give me a pen. I'm just ready. I'm ready to do this. And guys ready, everybody's ready, everybody's all in with their poker chips, all except him. And I don't blame him. This is a lot of stuff to go through. And then even basically you have Faye who said, well, did you talk to a lawyer first? Before even signing a contract? He goes, nah, we didn't do that.
This band could not have been more perfectly cast. Steve Zahn is the perfect Lenny. His comedic approach to this, that kind of goofy, just kind of living life by every moment kind of guy, is so perfect for that role. And a lot of musicians have been in a band with a Lenny and with a Guy and with a Jimmy and with a TB player, because these characters are so relatable.
Right. And that's actually how I feel. I think if I was in a band, I would be like Lenny, to be honest with you, because I could see aspects of myself in Lenny to the point where I'm like, yeah, that would be me. I would be the one who's like, hey, what's up? I'm in a band. How you doing? Yeah, I'll probably be like that guy, because that's true. Right.
And for me, I would literally be, there's a piece of each band member that I personally relate to. And I would be like one piece of all four, because there's that I'm in a band thing. I used to do that all the time when I was single 20 something years ago, prior to my wife. Like that was like, hey, I'm in a band. It didn't work, but that was just the thought process. Like, hey, it worked for Lenny,
Exactly. It could work for me. So what's going on? How you doing? But yeah.
When he gets married in Vegas, exactly. That is exactly what his character's all about. Like where he's like got the poker chips. He's like, thank you. I'm so happy you guys are here. Like,
this is the happiest day of my life. Here, take some. And then even like, just look, I'm going out with the Playboy bunny. Look. But yeah, I just thought it was funny though. But, then after that, Phil gets the song on Pennsylvania radio and books them at a rock and roll showcase concert in Pittsburgh. And I like how whenever he books them, Guy's like, look, I have to close shop for my dad. He goes, I like that about you. You're modest. Okay, I'll let you do that. And Guy hasn't taken into perspective, I'm going to Pittsburgh. This is happening. It's not until he looks at that stage and he's asked the people who are cleaning up, how many people can fit in this? Oh, about 2,500. And then that's when the reality hits.
Yep. And I'll tell you, the first time that that song comes on the radio, and you see Faye with the, she's walking down the street, putting the earbud in, listening to the radio, and everyone's listening to their radios. That scene where they end up in Guy's parents' shop and they're dancing around and Lenny's high-fiving the stand. That is my favorite
Me too.
scene in the movie. That is every musician's biggest dream, to get played on a major radio station. And I have been played on some New Jersey and New York stations with my older bands. And anytime that happened, that feeling in the movie is real. They captured it. That is, and even if you're just sitting there looking at the radio, twiddling your thumbs, what happened in that scene is happening in your head when you hear your own music on the radio. So to me, that scene is what makes me love the movie so much, because of that just joy. It was so innocent, and so like they were literally like grabbing every radio in the place, plugging them in, trying to tune them all out, like so they could hear this moment. And it's just, it makes me happy thinking about that friggin' scene in the movie, because they played it off so well.
Definitely. Let's see here. Great scene when they hear it on the radio for the first time.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that song. Similar scene in the movie Selena, and I love how real that one feels too.
Yep.
Definitely. And the thing that I liked about this, though, was okay, I like the fact that, oh my God, we're being played on the radio. And they're all running, and then they go into the guy's shop. He's about to sell somebody a washing machine, and all of a sudden news breaks, your song is on the radio. Next thing you know, they're all cranking up the radios. The father's over there going, what the hell is going on here? And finally his mom cranks up the radio, and she's happy for them, she's thrilled for them. The father's like, oh crap, I gotta hire my daughter now to do what I'm, because that's what he's afraid of. He's afraid of change. Not only is he afraid of change, but he's afraid because of the fact that it's like, oh, my dynasty, my name cannot live on now through my son. Now it's through my daughter. And now that chapter of my son is over with. This is going to be his new thing now.
Definitely. And I'm glad they didn't flesh that out too much, because again, that's a downer on the movie, that dynamic. And I'm glad they cut it back to as simple as it needed to be for the feel good part of the movie, because you do lose some of that happiness when they kind of go back and kind of hammer home how the dad is struggling with this. And I kind of like that, those scenes after the radio and the Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh, with that when he's got the cigarette hanging out of his mouth.
Yeah.
That scene in the extended cut of the movie is longer. And I appreciate that, because that is like their first time playing a live gig in front of an audience. And I had the good fortune in 2009 to open for Blues Traveler at a theater in upstate New Jersey, at the New Jersey Bergen Pack in Englewood, New Jersey. And I got to show up at 4:00 in the afternoon for sound check. And I walked into that empty theater, and I walked up on stage, and the band was up there. I introduced myself, and I had to do sound check to an empty theater that held 2,000 people. And that scene and that thing you do when they're looking out at those empty chairs, this was 2009, so I had obviously seen That Thing You Do many and many and many a times. When I was standing there, I literally thought back to this movie and said, they nailed that scene. Like, I'm looking at this empty I actually have a picture on my computer of just the microphone looking out at the empty Bergen Pack. I wanted to remember that moment for the rest, so I took a picture of it. And then 3 hours later, I played a 20-minute acoustic set by myself in front of 2,000 people opening for Blues Traveler. And it
That's
was
awesome.
one of the most exhilarating 20 minutes of my life. So seeing that unfold in That Thing You Do truly resonated with me, being a musician. So I guess this movie is my favorite because of so many things I can connect to it. if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, most definitely, because you have that nervousness of, oh, I'm going to be performing in front of 2,500 people, and this is not going to be an empty theater anymore. This is me. This is my dream. This is what's happening to me. And then the same retrospect to Guy looking out into the audience as well, into an empty theater, soon to be a packed theater. So yeah, I could definitely understand the relatability behind that, because of the fact that this is your dream, this is what you want, and this is also what Guy wants too. So yeah, I can definitely see why this is your favorite movie of all time, and I don't blame you. This movie is fantastic. It's very relatable. This is hands down one of my favorites that I watch every single time that's on DirecTV. I even have a special part in the my Genie where I basically just have it on record. It's
Nice.
so all I got to do is just pull it up. But I bought the extended cut recently, so I have that. But yeah, but we also have to go through technical difficulties when we're on stage, right? So,
Yes.
however, they are booed off stage afterwards. Phil brings a desperate guy to meet with Mr. White, an A&R representative for Playtone Records, who offers a contract and becomes their manager. He respells the band's name as the Wanderers, offers them advice on style and presentation.
Definitely. That scene where they introduce Tom Hanks, Mr. White, that's the big leagues. That's every musician's dream. So I have nothing to compare that to. I did see that. Oh my God, I love this song. It chimed in. He wants to see that picture. I will make sure to post that soon to my Twitter so that way you can see it. It's for anyone who's been watching or listening. But that moment, I have nothing to compare it to, but I can only imagine what's going through their heads during that scene. And the thing about Playtone Records, again, jumping into the real world, if you look at the CD, I'm going to hold it up close. It is actually a Playtone Records disc. And Playtone Records became a real record label. And they released the soundtrack to That Thing You Do in 1996, both Sopranos soundtracks, Bring It On, Josie and the Pussycats, Band of Brothers, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, The Truth About Charlie, and Starter for 10 were all soundtracks released on the actual Playtone Records label. So think about that, where the movie jumps into the real world, and it's another cool, fun fact about it.
Right, another meta kind of feel to it. And also, too,
Yes.
I never knew that I actually owned the Sopranos soundtrack
Look at
because
the
I'm a huge
CD next
Sopranos
time,
fan.
and you'll see the
Okay.
Playtone.
Okay, I'll definitely do that because I never noticed that before. So yeah, thank you for that. I do
No
appreciate
problem.
that little nugget there.
That's
But
part of the music nerdery inside my head. I can't.
hey, it's all good. I love your sweating nerdiness when it comes down to music. So that's what I love. But dude, okay, so with Tom Hanks being introduced 15 minutes into the movie, I think is fantastic because you have a slow build where you have them going on this ride with Phil, and then it kind of goes on a halt because of the fact they got booed and they thought that this was going to be the last ride. Then it's like, oh wait, now we actually have a big town manager now that's going to take us on board for this rest of this journey. And you get to see how the music industry basically starts changing them and making them start having conflicts with each other, even though they don't need to have conflicts with each other, and how they try to change Guy's look and everything else. So I like how Tom Hanks comes in with that little smile that he has, being all nice and friendly to them and things like that. But in his world, this is the business. This is his thing. He has people to answer to.
Yes.
They're just basically dinner on a serving line, and he's trying to serve them the best, trying to serve the other managers that they have. So that's the way I see it whenever I look at Tom Hanks's character.
Yeah. Tom Hanks basically plays the businessman, like you said, of this. And his role in this is to shape this band into the image of Playtone Records. And there are a lot of labels that when they bring on artists, they sign them to developmental contracts. And those contracts are doing exactly what Mr. White did for this band, giving them a style, giving them a look, giving them a trademark, which these glasses, believe it or not by design, are kind of similar to his. They're just my favorite sunglasses. But anyway, that his serious stoic nature with that little bit of a grin is so perfectly played because you never know whether to love or fear him because he could take it all away from the band just like that.
Right.
And, you know, not to foreshadow, but at some point that does come to fruition.
Shades.
Shades.
But yeah, it does because basically he's the god to them because of the fact that he's going to be the one who puts food in their stomachs and because of the fact that they're paying them now. So yeah,
Mhm.
so they have no choice but to go along with this, and including insisting that Guy always wears his sunglasses, ask him to join the Playtone tour of Midwestern State Fairs, and suggest Jimmy's girlfriend Faye join the tour, maintaining their wardrobe. So wardrobe mistress is what he calls her.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if this is where they decided, you know what, Tom would be perfect for Elvis, for the Elvis movie, because I could see a little bit of the Connell in Tom Hanks in this movie a little bit as well. So I was wondering if maybe they might have actually picked something up from that and like, okay, he would be perfect for the Elvis biopic.
Interesting. Interesting. I didn't think about that.
But what do you think about how he plays off that narrative, though? Do you see him as the Connell type person, or do you see him basically just being this shark where he?
To answer that, I have to split it because in
Mhm.
the theatrical version, he is meant to you're not supposed to know in the theatrical version if he is love or hate. It's supposed to
Mhm.
be scary, but he's helping us. But so there was that dynamic. But in the directorial cut, when you see that he has a partner in Howie Long and you see him smiling and laughing with Howie Long and being a human, it humanizes him so much that it takes away from that intensity he has for the rest of the movie. And I think they pulled that scene because they didn't want to humanize Tom Hanks' character. They wanted him to always be seen as you don't know what to
Mhm.
expect with him. And he would sit there and, oh, exactly. Yes. Because he, like when he talks to Guy, him and Guy had a nice dynamic together where Tom Hanks understood, where Mr. White understood that Guy was the smart one in the band. And that because he says it at the end and he goes through and says the talent, the basket case, you know, all this stuff, kind of like the Breakfast Club. It wasn't the basket case. I was thinking of that movie. But anyway, you think about that. Tom Hanks knows this band. They are literally band 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to him because he's got the whole Playtone galaxy that they're out on tour with. So he's just part of these other bands and they're looking for a certain sound and style. And that's why when you get to that tour and you get to introduce to the Chordettes and all these other bands, they really nailed the 50s because if you listen to 50s music, I'm a big fan of doo-wop and a big fan of beach music and the old 50s style. Every single style they hit is right on the money. Between the Chordettes being like that Motown type sound, you had the guy that sang Mr. Downtown, which is supposed to be your not Tom Jones because that's a couple decades later, but that almost Frank Sinatra kind of guy with the wink wink and the guns, the finger guns. And you
Right.
get all these different, and that is a snapshot of the music of that era, which is why I love this soundtrack so much. I actually have songs from this soundtrack on my actual 1950s playlist because they did such a fantastic job. You wouldn't know they weren't real 50 songs.
Right, and that's the authenticity of this soundtrack because of the way
Mhm.
that it feels. I grew up on 1950s and 60s music with my mom, and then after that, my uncle taught me AC/DC in the 70s. So basically, I went through a whole music lesson in the 50s and 60s with my mom. And then I went transitioned into 70s to 90s music. So yeah, I really learned to appreciate different aspects of music through the genres of music throughout the years. So yeah, I could definitely see that. My first initial thought was Tom Jones because of the fact that's what I was accustomed to, even though it was before its time. So yeah, I could definitely see Mr. Downtown being like a Frank Sinatra type, even a Tom Jones type person though too. So and you can definitely tell Tom put that little bit of flavor in that character though with those
Yes.
two. But yeah, so After that winds up happening, let's see here, TB fall. Okay, so during the tour, the Wonders meets the other acts, learn about the business, and becomes better performers. Jimmy spends time with the singer while the bassist TB falls for a member of a girl group, the Charlinas. I think that's how you say it, right? Chatelinas, I
Oh,
think.
the Chantrelines?
Yeah, that's it.
Chantrelines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
That, the Hold My Hand, Hold My Heart, where Ethan Embry's doing the whole, like, to the dancing like they are as they're
Mhm.
performing it. To me, in the theatrical version, they kept it at a perfect amount. In the director's cut, they really extended it and kind of drew it out a little too much. Diane Dane, Diane Dane is the perfect Johnny character for her style of music. And she is what Johnny is meant to be, the lone star. And that's what he ends up becoming. So the fact that Johnny and Diane Dane were having that dynamic, they were seeing eye to eye on a musical and artistic level, which was getting flirty or however you want to call it. And meanwhile, the good girl back from Erie, Pennsylvania, Faye, was more, you could see throughout the whole movie, aligning with Guy's character. Like, to me, when they ended up together, it was not a big bombshell drop to me. It was very much teased and calculated throughout the whole movie. The chemistry between those two characters was very understandable, and it was very on the nose. And I feel like that was done on purpose because they're more humble and their characters are very similar and aligned. Whereas Johnny's character is more like the Diane Dane type.
Hmm. I can definitely see that. And at that time, though, too, TB is also going through his own emotions as well, with him signing up for the army because he's only there for the end of summer. And then he
Yep.
winds up doing these push ups up in the cafe because him and Guy were originally supposed to hang out together. And the next thing you know,
Yep.
he winds up hanging out with the army crew. And then from there, he goes to Disney World, ditches the band to go to Disney World to ride on a Disney ride with Mickey Mouse and all them, and then taking pictures, selfies with the guys, and then that leaves, of course, now an open range for Tom Hanks's character to say, "Hey, look, you guys are having problems here. Where's your bass player at? We can't." And you can definitely tell Guy is stressed out because at that time too, he got hungover. And because he went out, he didn't remember anything that his manager even told him. And next thing you know, he wakes up. Then his manager, Tom Hanks, calls him. He goes, "Hey, look, you need to get over to the studio. We have a problem. Your bassist is not even here." And Guy can't even find the stage. He's in total disarray. And then finally he finds it. And then he's like, "Well, what are we going to do?" So right then and there, they make an executive decision to replace TB as the bassist.
Bummer, man. I like TB. Wolfman, I mean, he's the antithesis. He is the session player, extremely talented, but that angry look was the polar opposite of what the Wonders were, the youthful innocence, which is why when they're performing live on TV and they cut to the bass player at the Wolfman or whatever the hell his name is, they immediately go, okay, next, because he's got this, real smolder Wolfman, right? He's got the smoldering look, and it's the actual opposite of what
they're going for.
They're going for.
Because there's supposed to be these teens that are innocent.
Yes.
And so they're like, okay, well, we're not going to try and pay attention to the fact that we replaced TB. So we're going to cut to Wolfman. And after we introduce the band with Wolfman, we're going to quickly saying, "Oh, you didn't see anything. You're going to do John Cena. We're going to John Cena you." And then we're going to go switch over to the rest of the original members. And I'm actually surprised the parents didn't mention, where's TB at?
Yeah, they didn't care.
All they cared about was Guy, because that was the turning point for me. I'm like, okay, you guys are now fully supporting him. And then my other favorite part, and I know I skipped it, was when the sister goes, "So does that mean I get paid now?"
No.
No. Let's see here. We actually have something from Jason. Diane Dane is the caution to Jimmy. He thinks that she is representative of everything he wants, but she warns him away from the life he thinks he wants.
Right. I agree with that. And but again, Jimmy becomes her anyway. Because if you watch what happened, he goes on to just do it anyway. So even the caution is there, it doesn't resonate. It doesn't hit through to him. Nothing gets through to him. Because if it got through to him, you would never see the I quit.
I quit.
I quit. Like that part is his obnoxiousness coming out. And look, I have been in bands that have broken up, and it is just as ugly as they portrayed it. It's not cool when a band breaks up. It's as big as a relationship. It's as big as a marriage. It's bands become family, whether they
Right.
want to or not.
And like they said too, they've only been together for like 2 months. And I like the scene where the blues singer's talking over to Guy. He goes, "Well, that doesn't make a difference. Where you're in a band, you're a family, no matter how long you've been in it. You're in it for life. And if you can't get, yep." And I thought I really love him as an actor. I really loved him in this one. I really believe that he was that blues jazzy kind of guy who was trying to talk Guy into it. Hey, look, if you do not snap your bandmates out of it, you're going to lose your friends and you're going to lose your band members to the point where there's no band.
Well, I'll tell you, Del Paxton, that song Time to Blow from the movie was actually written by Steve Tyrell, who is a jazz blues player and singer, as well as Robert Mann. That song I actually have on my jazz playlist, along with Coltrane and Burrell and Oscar Peterson and Art Blakey. That Del Paxton song sounds like that 1950s hard bop jazz that was so popular. And to me, there is something so magical that they were able to capture that old school jazz song, because that song, yes, it's exactly right. That some bands, that's 2 minutes too long. That jazz song is so amazing. And again, it brings that layer of authenticity to this movie. When you see a guy sit down in the studio and he just starts playing that drum beat, you feel it because he's all alone in that studio. You feel the tension and in the playing. And then Dell just kind of walks in and he goes, "What was that beat you were doing?" And he kind of sits down at the piano with him and they jam together. I get goosebumps just thinking about that scene, because it's just, that's that guy's idol. And I had the chance to open for Blues Travel. They're one of my favorite bands in the world. And getting to go up to them and get a picture with them and talk with them about how much their music meant to me, and then get to share the stage with them that night. It was like that moment in this. I unfortunately didn't get them to come record in the studio with me. I wish I did, but I didn't. But that moment of Guy and Del Paxton jamming together, that's like
A lightning in the bottle.
It's a beautiful moment in the movie for me.
For sure. And here's the thing, I idolize like Aerosmith, Jonathan Davis, stuff like that. And I can just imagine them coming up to me. "Hey, look, man, let's try that thing you were trying." Like, yeah. Really? Yeah. Should we invite the, no. It's just us. It's just us.
Let's make this a duo.
let's that to me was really a special moment for Guy, where he's like, "You know what? I'm having this rough day, but it's going to be okay. I mean, I get what I wanted, but in the end, at least I have my moment with my idol, the person that I look up to the most."
And here's where the theatrical and the extended edition, the director's cut, veer way off. Because at this point, after the jam session, Guy reaches out to the radio DJ that the Wonders were on earlier in the movie. And he says, "Hey, do you happen to have any availability for like a job or something?" And the DJ said, "If you can get me Del Paxton as an interview, I'll get you a job here." And in the director's cut, when Faye says, "What are you doing?" he explains he's got a job. But in the theatrical version, it's completely different. He goes, "I don't know what I'm going to do." So they pulled all of that extra stuff out. And I feel like that should have been in the theatrical movie, because that is the perfect ending to his character.
For Guy, right.
I feel like alluding to it in the photo montage at the end was cute, but seeing it unfold in the movie was more powerful.
Right. I gotcha.
Yeah.
For me at the time, this is before I seen the director's cut, I'm like, okay, you're going through the emotions of like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life now. I thought I had this thing going on. And I'm like, okay, so I understand where you're coming from, Guy. I understand the anxieties and stuff like that you went through, and you feel like this is all for nothing. but you still walk away with the girl. So therefore, you're still closing the chapter of your old life and beginning a new life with somebody else. So that's what I got from that. But to pull all that stuff out, you're walking away with more than just the girl. You're walking away with your dreams of being a disc jockey, even and you're being interviewing your idol, and you also get to ride the high horse with the girl that you've been wanting.
Mhm.
So you're getting all three things into one ending, and it's like I said, it's a perfect story arc for him.
Yes, and every character got their perfect story arc, if you think about it.
True.
In that, Jimmy goes off and becomes famous as he was meant to be. That was where it was written. Lenny was whatever happened to him, I forgot, it wasn't good. I think he got divorced or was on, like, several marriages or something.
Yeah. Hold on,
And
I
then
got it. I actually have it in my notes real quick if
oh,
you want. Yeah, it's an epilogue. So it reveals that Jimmy became a record producer. Lenny is a single hotel and casino manager
yeah, there it is.
in
There it is.
Nevada. Bassist TB went to war in Vietnam and earned a Purple Heart. Then worked in construction
Mhm.
in Orlando, Florida. And Guy and Faye are married with 4 children in Bainbridge Island, Washington, where Guy teaches jazz composition at their own basically their own music studio, basically.
Perfect ending to that. Honestly, these characters, they all got paid off, which is why I know we talked about a sequel in the beginning. And as much as I'd love to see one, they really tied it up in a nice bow. And it is a perfect movie for me. The theatrical version, the director's cut is something I enjoy because of the fact I love the original so much.
Hmm.
And it depends on my mood. Because I watch this movie at least once a year. And depending on my watch when it comes up for the year, depending on my mood, I either go for the happy go lucky version or the extended version to kind of relive those other scenes a little more.
Right, I gotcha. And I think I go through the same process with Almost Famous because there is a bootleg version
Yes.
and then
Yes.
there's a theatrical version. And I watched the theatrical cut enough to know what's extended and what's not extended. And some of the stuff, like you said, the exposition on this movie is not so good on some aspects, and it lands some on some of the other ones. But for me, I'm always going to go theatrical when it comes down to Almost Famous. That's just me because of the fact I've seen the theatrical cut so much to the point where that's
Mhm.
actually my pull. With this one lands on both for me as an extended cut and as a theatrical release as well.
They hit differently,
Hmm.
slightly differently. The feel good vibe is there. And in the extended version, some payoffs you have to wait longer for. So they're kind of, I don't want to say dragged out, but they're kind of left to simmer a little bit more before the payoffs.
Hmm.
And some of them that works, like we talked about, but there's some instances where I feel the payoff should have been as simple as it was. So I almost feel like to me, a perfect version would be kind of a cut of the two, which I do video editing for a full-time job. I should probably consider cutting just my own mix of it that I want to see, because cutting out the parts I felt were fleshed out too much and leaving in the rest, because those
Right.
extended dance sequences to me are just wonderful.
Right. It puts you in the time period. And matter of fact, I actually said this on my Almost Famous review too, because okay, I drive a 2015 um, Hyundai Sinatra, and whenever I put on Almost Famous, I'm no longer in that car. I'm actually in a 1970s vehicle.
Yes.
So whenever I put that soundtrack on, I'm no longer in 2023. I'm in the 1970s. With this one, and even though I don't have the soundtrack, whenever I see those girls dancing, I'm no longer in 2023. I'm now in 1950s,
Yes.
enjoying this band just as how they enjoy watching this band. And I love it. I have goosebumps right now just talking about it. That's how much that I love this film.
This film to me, when I tell people it's my favorite, I do get a lot of surprise, because it's not a masterpiece of film. It's a wonderfully produced film. The attention to detail is perfect. The attention to music is amazing. This is a love letter to music, and
Hmm.
I am passionate about nothing more than my family, and then number 2 is music. And to me, music, the love that Tom Hanks put into this movie, I feel that. And that's why I love this movie so much. Is it
Same.
the best movie ever made? No. But there's no movie that's made me hit stop and feel happier every single time I watch it than this. And it's not a filthy movie. You could watch it with your 5-year-old as well as your 90-year-old grandma and still feel the same amount of joy. And not a lot of movies can pull that off. There's an
No.
innocence to it, there's a happiness to it, and there's a joy that a lot of modern movies don't have anymore because it's not meant to be a impactful drama tugging at your heartstrings. It's just supposed to be a happy kind of like documentary, not so much, but it is meant to elude feelings of happiness and joy. And not a lot of movies do that in this style anymore. And that's a
No,
shame.
definitely not. I wish they would though. And that's one thing I liked about this. Like you said, this is like a love letter to music lovers, just as Almost Famous is a love letter to music lovers. And that's why
Yes.
I wanted to dedicate this the Almost Famous episode and this one episode to music lovers because of the fact I don't here's the thing, whenever I was choosing the films I wanted to review for the month of April, I'm like, I want to do That Thing You Do and I want to do Almost Famous because I'm a music lover, I'm a movie lover, and I wanted to pay my respects to people that love music and movies just as much as I do. So that's why I decided to do this. So this is dedicated to the music lovers and movie lovers and people who love soundtracks as well. So, Brian, I just want to say, man, this was a great episode. I really enjoyed having you here. I love listening to your podcast and things like that too. And by the way, yeah, oh my god, I love that song. I need to see that Almost Famous review. You can see it on our YouTube channel, but if you want to take it on the go, you can. That's actually on the audio only podcast as well. So you can take that on the go with you and you can enjoy it for that. It's only like 47 minutes. So it's actually perfect if you want to listen to it on audio. So yeah, go on ahead and check that out. And also too, Monday at 9 o'clock Central Time, 10 o'clock Eastern Time, I'm going to be going live again, but we're going to do The Fifth Element with my co-host Alex. And if you guys love merch, we have merch. We have a merch store if you guys like merchandising and things like that. So make sure you go on ahead and get yourself a t-shirt and things like that too. We have that. And we have so much stuff that we were going to try and do. Brian's helping me out so much with the Patreon, trying to figure out the angles for me to do. I do appreciate every little thing that you're trying to help me with, Brian, to try and get this thing kicked off. So I do appreciate you.
Dude, when I have said that, us indie podcasters, it's a community. We all have to be there and kind of help each other out because at the end of the day, there's no large networks that are kind of laying the groundwork for us. So any way that I can help you or my other podcasting friends, it's an absolute pleasure to be able to do that. I love coming on and talking. This is not my wheelhouse, talking movies. I'm used to talking music. So I was a little nervous coming on tonight, but I had a great time doing it. And if people that listen to your show are big music fans, I would love to invite them to come check out what I do over at My Weekly Mixtape, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could find me at myweeklymixtape.com, or you could subscribe to My Weekly Mixtape wherever you listen to podcasts. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google. Just search My Weekly Mixtape. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all at My Weekly Mixtape. I am a passionate music person. I love talking music. And what I try to bring out on the show is guests and other people that will enjoy discussing and celebrating the songs that we all love. So thank you for having me on tonight. It was great. And I hope to do it again sometime.
Same here, man. Don't be a stranger over here. You're a family now for the Movieloversunite. So there you go. I just want to thank, oh my God, I love that song. I just want to say thank you for subscribing to the channel, and I hope that you enjoy the content that we have out. As a matter of fact, I just released the Fast 10 trailer reaction. That's on the channel right now for you guys to enjoy. Enjoy some of my shorts that don't make it into the podcast or anything like that either. So I try to make it a little bit different, a lot more fun. So with that being said, guys, that's going to be it as far as this show goes. Thank you again, Brian, so much. It's been an honor and a privilege to have you on here talking about this movie. And always until next time, guys, Bye bye.